So, we've been talking about why you might select a broader range of genes to introduce into your Indigenous plantings in order to cope with climate change, but slightly fewer people, probably not statistically significant, raise the issue about doing it for changes other than climate. And I'm thinking of things like fragmentation, environmental weeds, change fire regimes and that sort of thing. So I guess the same sort of principles apply. As I was looking at that diagram, I was thinking of all those things on the right. We've got climate gradient on the bottom, but I was thinking your vertical scale could be fragmentation or fire regime or degree of environmental weeds or urbanisation, or you could have an n-dimensional space. I'm revealing my origins as a PhD in mathematics, I'm afraid. So I think climate change needs to be taken as just one of a whole complex range of multidimensional influences on the environment. And I guess you could apply the same sorts of principles to all sorts of other changes. I'm going to take your question in a minute, but do any of the experts want to comment on how this sort of stuff relates to changes other than climate change? No. Then Erica, I can take your question once we've got the microphone. Warren, just over here. It takes a moment before it comes on.
And that's good. Thank you. I'm sorry, Graham, but the question I wanted to ask is concerning the plots, and the question that Irene asked, which was really, I think, about the complexity of ecology that's been tried, and maybe this is impossible to try within the plot to get layers of heights and, you know, just the interactions. The answer was, I think, just like what's on display there, which is perhaps individual trees, or that's my understanding. Have I misunderstood that? Is it too complex? And if it is, can't we have some plots that try complexity?
So the answer is yes and no. So we have got some single tree trials going in. Several people have got single trees or a couple of species trials. There are also some trials that are complex mixes as well. So it depends on the research question that's being investigated. So it does range right down from single species to even trying to do the different, like, ground, middle, upper story as well, yeah. They're a little bit fewer and far between because they are more complex to plant and manage. But yeah, we are trying to do that complexity as well.
And the more you increase the variables, the more it's difficult to actually get sound data.
That can be the challenge. Like if you plant acacias and eucalypts, you never know if the eucalypt growth is because of the acacias and the nitrogen, excess nitrogen they've produced. You know, so if one's 2 feet away from if an eucalypt's 2 feet away from an acacia, is that having a different result than if it's 1 foot away from an acacia? That sort of thing. Oh, I'm talking in feet. Where did I get that from? Sorry, another question.
Sorry, as a follow-up question then, isn't that exactly the reason why you need to do that, to find out what the associations are and what the actual end result effect will be?
Absolutely, but experimentally that's very, very challenging to get the data. It's a lot of experimental manipulation, and if you have too many layers in your experiment, you can actually lose sight of the thing you're trying to actually get at.
You won't get the right answer otherwise. That's the problem that we have sitting together. That's what we have about the do no harm, that we find that if you can't replicate nature, you shouldn't interfere with nature. That's probably all.
Yeah, and that's very valid. There are, lots of... So... Just want to shift your thinking a little bit. So some of the recent literature I've been reading is not necessarily about do no harm, it's the low regrets. So you are forced to do something, what is the least impact you can do? But in some cases we're going to have to actually go out and do something really challenging, really, really challenging.
You saw the federal government about energy policy then.
I'm not going near the federal government on energy policy. Ari, did you have a comment?
Just a comment in response to that. I mean, on the one hand, we're setting up scientific plots where we are having to be quite prescriptive, and on the other hand, there's nothing to stop you trialling some things yourselves. And certainly landholders around Victoria are actually trialling their own thing as well to a large extent. But what we're saying here is if you are going to do that, you know, by all means talk to a scientist, by all means try and get extra value out of it in terms of documenting where your provenance has come from and what you're putting into the ground, and by all means have a way of capturing that long term and keep monitoring it so you can actually see what happens to these things. So, you know, you can do quite a lot locally in your own system, and it doesn't all have to be experiments.